Hey everyone! Before we open today's file, please make sure to follow us on Instagram at d.s.radio, where you can find all the images that go along with today's case. You can drop us an email at contact.dsradio@gmail.com. You can find all of our socials in the Linktree bio on our Instagram profile, including links to merch. If you're feeling especially generous, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/dystopian simulation radio, where you can get access to our exclusive Instagram page and make suggestions for upcoming episode topics that you would like us to cover. Speaking of Patreon, thanks to our Patreons, Riff Cult, Cropley Crab, Cash Broadus, Raspberry Jr., Jason R. Nelson, Creepy Paper, Jamie Sook, Michael Laughlin, Lindsay Keller, Mike Wright, Greer Weaver, Kelsey Carruthers, Linz Gibbon, Drake Holvig, Only Child, Michael M, Wesley Akers, Riaz K, Emily Medeiros, Pip, Heather Wynn, Graves, Devon Sweatshirt, The Ordained Sinister Minister, and Philip Hoffman. Hi everyone, it's just Linz dropping in real quick to say a few things. First of all, congratulations to Emily of Morbidology, the One Woman Army, for winning Best International Podcast at iHeartRadio Podcast Awards. Amazing. Congratulations. Emily's awesome. She is the nicest person you'll ever meet. And I just want to say congratulations and thank you for all the advice and just being a really good friend over the years in the true crime scene. And secondly, I wanted to say thank you to everybody who has tipped us on TipJar recently. We really, really appreciate your support, and I want to say thank you specifically to Lucas McCann, Tom M. Hurst, Philip Hoffman, C. Roberts. Thank you so much.
Everybody, welcome to Dystopian Simulation Radio. I'm your host, Chris.
And I'm your host, Linz.
How's it going, Linz?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Pretty good. We're about halfway through our marathon recording session that we're having today. And now it's my time to tell you a story. So, Linz.
Yes.
If you needed to be alone, like let's say you just had enough of everything, and you needed to get away from everyone and everything and listen to some Danzig records, where would you go? Anywhere in the world?
A cabin in the woods in the north of Sweden.
Okay. Well, today is not about the north of Sweden, but we are going to talk about some of the more isolated places out there today. So this is about a topic that has fascinated me for a very long time. Uncontacted peoples of the world.
Oh, hell yes.
And would you believe it, in 2022, there are still groups of people out there completely unconnected from the rest of our global civilization. How nuts is that? Think about it. We're over here with our Game Boys and our VHS videotapes, and they are still out there living that hunter-gatherer life. Now, probably the most unbelievable part of there being uncontacted tribes is that, well, they haven't run into us savages at any point.
Lucky them.
And I specifically mean us, the British, who treated the pre-21st century like a game of Age of Empires with all the cheat codes turned on. No fog of war. However, generally, the term uncontacted peoples is somewhat of a misnomer. They have run into what we would call 21st century groups, but they have resisted any forms of integration. Sometimes these groups are known as indigenous peoples in voluntary isolation, which means they met us and said, no thank you, I don't need a fourth Matrix film in my life, and have steered clear ever since.
It was terrible.
The definition also does not mean that these people are completely isolated. They often have had or still have contact and trade with other neighbouring groups living a similar lifestyle, but who do not interact with modern civilization. It's estimated that there are between 100 and 200 of these groups in the world. Linz, any thoughts as to where these peoples may be located?
New Guinea. Okay. I don't know, little islands, Micronesia. I don't know. Like the Amazon jungle.
Okay. You are hitting on all the major ones here, to be honest. There's 3 main locations with a sneaky 4th one thrown in there as well. So, of course, that these groups are actually hidden away. So,
Wales.
They could be anywhere, like Wales. So, keep your eyes peeled out there. But the big one is South America. In Brazil alone, there is an estimated 77 to 84 groups alone. Known groups exist in Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, Paraguay, Peru, Venezuela, and the aforementioned Brazil. In 1987, a great year because it produced me, the Brazilian government marked out around 33,000 miles of protected land that would not be developed and can essentially be thought of a reservation along the same lines that Native Americans run in the USA. However, the indigenous peoples of Brazil generally did not know that they were living on a reservation because they are uncontacted. However,
it's like The Village by M. Night Shyamalan.
However, last year, the government announced plans to reduce down the size of the reservations in order to develop the Amazon basin further. This is not to mention that some of the nomadic groups have picked up COVID, with hundreds of indigenous people succumbing to the pandemic.
Oh.
Yeah. So
how did that happen?
Well, there are points where they may interact with people. So they may not be in contact with the wider general public. But for example, Brazil does have ambassadors that will go out to the people to make sure that they're okay.
And cough on them.
And presumably so. And
just to free up some more space over there.
Yeah.
But considering they're an uncontacted people... Mm-hmm. I mean, we haven't even had COVID yet.
No.
Touch wood.
No.
So it just seems crazy to me that they would.
I think the thing is with that is that they've picked up COVID from somewhere, and because they're completely unvaccinated, that it's spreading rapidly throughout the tribes. Yeah. In other countries in South America, there are generally reservations and or protected land. Colombia seems to have gone the furthest and even has armed patrols of the gigantic reservations created to prevent those who would seek to take the resources there illegally. The next main area of interest is Indonesia, and specifically the West Papua region. It is illegal for any journalists or organisations to enter West Papua, but there isn't anything enshrined in law to protect the 40 uncontacted groups living there. The final main area, I'm going to skip for a moment, because that's what we're going to be talking about today, but the sneaky 4th one that I promised is Central Africa.
Ooh.
It has been proposed that there are uncontacted nomadic tribes that live there. But
that's really cool.
Little to no evidence has actually been produced as to that.
Have you ever seen the guys who go around with the hyenas and they dress in skins?
No.
It's awesome.
Is that in Central Africa?
Somewhere.
Wales.
I think it's Wales.
So anyway.
Sorry.
Coming back to the final area, it is India. Well, Indian territory. North Sentinel Island is actually geographically closer to Bangkok than it is to Calcutta. So this is the main group or main area we're going to be discussing today. Linz, have you heard of North Sentinel Island and the Sentinelese people that live there?
I have not heard of the people, no.
Okay. Well, North Sentinel Island is on the far right of the Bay of Bengal, close to the Andaman Islands, and nothing else. The island itself is almost entirely covered in dense forest, making it very difficult to find anything on Google Maps, and believe me, I tried.
Google, there's a Google van just driving around that forest.
I'd like to talk about the history of the island to begin with, and you see it all starts in 1880 with the British. Royal Navy officer Maurice Van Portman was the governor of the Andaman Islands and decided that the rumours that he'd heard about the Sentinelese people were too good an opportunity to miss. So he got himself a posse, he sailed over, abducted 2 adults and 4 children, just like any respectable British officer would have done.
That's just classic, isn't it?
The 2 adults were elderly, and died shortly after their arrival in Port Blair. Being cut off from the rest of the world for so long, the Sentinelese people had and have no resistance to everyday viruses that we are just slathered in.
Yeah,
like 24/7.
exactly. I was about to say that. You're just going to kill them by breathing near them.
So Portman decided to send the children back with large amounts of gifts to establish relations. Some have suggested that the fact that he returned infected children after abducting them may have been the cause of the North Sentinelese people's ongoing aggression towards outside peoples.
Most definitely.
Although that's purely speculative. Portman did return to the island several more times, but the native people hid the instant they saw him. Now, one more note on Portman. He did realise the effect the diseases had on the native peoples and wrote about them, alongside photographs of other Andaman Island peoples. Now, not only was Portman a kidnapper, a child abductor, and a general colonial menace, he was also a massive pervert. And he spent literally an entire lifetime photographing the local men's wangs and measuring them in great detail for his private record. He would even spend the time to pose for local men in mock Greek homoerotic poses. And no wonder the people of North Sentinel Island ran and hid from this member-measuring miscreant.
I was going to say, I would close my doors forever after that. So, what was he measuring these?
So essentially, he was from a vaguely well-to-do family. So he wasn't a royal or anything like that, but he was vaguely connected with the upper class at the time.
Yeah.
He was promoted very, very quickly to being a naval officer and was given this nothing post as head of the Andaman Islands that he held for almost his entire life until he returned back to London. And essentially, he was put in charge of these tiny little islands and the local peoples there and just was allowed to just do whatever he wanted.
You just
unchecked.
decided, I know what I'll do. I'll measure all of their penises.
Yes.
So what was the average?
According to Portman, massive.
Really?
I don't know. I tried not to look at these photographs.
Oh, they're out there.
Oh, yeah, they're out there.
If you want to see them, they'll be at d.s.radio
No,
on
they won't.
Instagram.
So the next recorded encounter with the outside world came in 1896 when a convict escaped from a penal colony on the Great Andaman
Penal
Islands.
colony.
Presumably run by Portman. And he lashed together a makeshift raft and tried to drift to safety. But instead, he drifted to our favourite island. And he was discovered by a search party later on with his throat slit and a body full of arrow holes.
Wow.
Various others have landed on the island at different times, either pursuing escapees or just in exploration. But few bothered to land on the island, and the British never bothered to actually take it because of its relative uselessness next to the larger and more fruitful nearby Andaman Islands. Now, the islands fell under the rule of India, a now independent nation. And in 1956, India declared North Sentinel Island a tribal reserve and made the surrounding 3 nautical miles illegal to enter, which were supposedly patrolled by armed guards. And were, nobody was ever going to go there again. Can you guess what happens next?
Someone brings the Bible.
Not just yet.
Oh,
but we will come to that.
Maybe, I guess some kind of, somebody who wants to be like the first person to contact the tribes will rock up and be like, try to communicate and go and think that they know how to do it and how to get along with these people. Someone wants the glory.
Well, in 1967, T.N. Pandit, an Indian anthropologist, led a group to the island with the permission of the Indian government.
Oh.
They approached the island and observed the Sentinelese people from a distance with binoculars from a boat. However, the landing party began to approach the island, and as they reached the shore, the native people just disappeared into the shadows of the forest. The team followed their footsteps for a click, found a village, and there they found 18 lean-to huts with still burning fires, the remains of a pig, hunting equipment, and fresh fruits. The team left gifts and then withdrew back to the boat.
What kind of gifts? Did it say what they left?
I think they generally left food, but they also left some metal materials like cooking pots and things like that.
Okay.
Wait a minute. Guess who's back? It's T.N. Pandit now in 1974, and this time he's got National Geographic in tow.
Of course he does.
Their aim was to shoot a documentary called Man in Search of Man.
It sounds more like a Grindr profile.
But ended up with the director getting shot with an arrow in the thigh. The team landed and left gifts again. Now, this time included a live pig, a doll, metal cookware, coconuts, and for some reason, a miniature car.
A miniature car?
A miniature car.
You like those battery-powered ones you'd have as a child, like a Jeep?
I think so. They're just a little...
Why on earth would they leave these things?
The Sentinelese responded to the gift by launching a barrage of arrows, one of which landed straight in the director's leg. TN Pandit seemed to be making a career for himself out of going to the island and led several trips during the 70s and 80s, often as an expert advisor to tour parties or visiting dignitaries looking to encounter some of the local people. The response that they got was mixed. Sometimes the Sentinelese welcomed the gifts and there was a somewhat peaceful interaction, and other times they were met with violent attacks or obscene gestures, clearly indicating the visitors were not welcome. These obscene gestures include squatting in a defecating position and what has been described quite beautifully as the swaying of penises.
I don't think that's a...
Well, Maurice von Portman was gutted that he missed that.
Yeah, I was going to say, He's getting his sprocket panorama camera out for that one. But I just like the idea that how they react to you depends on whether or not they like your gifts. It's like they give you a small car. Fuck you. What's this? And like, oh, we'll leave you some blankets and pots. Oh, very good.
Yeah, I'll sway my penis.
I'll just shoot one of you in the thigh. Thank you very much.
Now, the next major...
I'm going to do that at Christmas and on birthdays. If I don't like your gift, you're getting an arrow.
The next major incident occurred in 1981 when the cargo ship, the MV Primrose, wrecked itself off the coast of North Sentinel Island. The ship was carrying chicken feed to Australia. Now, while waiting to be rescued, the captain became increasingly aware of an armed Sentinelese contingent massing on the beach. After watching for a little while, he spied that there seemed to be canoes that were being readied, and he radioed for a weapons drop. Yes, a chicken feed transport ship requested to have a cache of arms dropped to them. Fortunately, for the crew, the strong waves prevented the islanders from boarding the crew before they could be airlifted out. But that did take a week after the grounding.
Airlifted out? He tried to declare war on the people.
Eventually, the Sentinelese did make it to the ship, and they scavenged whatever they could, especially metal, which they cannot create themselves, but have learned how to cold forge into other objects, such as weapons. So there has been observed that Sentinelese people have daggers made out of metal.
Oh, that's amazing, actually. Yeah, impressive.
The scrap dealers who were contracted by the Indian government to scrap the ship often reported friendly interactions with the locals, who would often just board the ship searching for more metal. The scrap dealers happily gave them anything that they couldn't use, generally quite good interactions between the two. Now, the last major expeditions into the island took place in the early 90s when teams had a series of friendly interactions with the Sentinelese. These heavily videotaped interactions, which I would encourage you to go and watch on YouTube, involved approaching the island and giving the gift of coconuts. A fruit known to the islanders, but one that does not grow there, therefore it is a good gift. The native people were wary, and one male member raised his bow to the visitors before a female member of the Sentinelese pushed the arrow down. The islanders then received the coconuts. They generally seemed quite inquisitive about the whole event. One even getting very close before being pulled back by a female. It must be said that one male does start to sway his penis at them, so maybe they weren't entirely welcome.
You know what? I think I've seen this footage before on YouTube.
Yeah,
but I didn't realise it was that people.
It's quite famous. It's quite famous
I've
footage.
definitely seen it, but I didn't know anything about them. But so there's some penis swaying in that one.
There is a little bit if you look carefully.
Which you clearly have.
I do. Now, in 1994, the Indian government decided to cease contact with the North Sentinel Island, and since then, more or less have maintained a policy of no deliberate contact, intervening only in the case of natural disasters or to thwart poachers who may target the island. No major cases of this came about until 2004 when the Indian Ocean tsunami affected the island. North Sentinel Island was so badly hit that it actually merged with several smaller islands in the vicinity. It destroyed much of the fishing ground because of the rising of land, and it exposed the coral reefs in the area to air, which killed them more or less instantly. The island was surveyed by helicopter, and they did see several Sentinelese unharmed, making what is described as hostile gestures towards the camera. I'll assume that they were just helicoptering their dicks at the helicopter.
We've got to up the ante here, boys.
Several expeditions bringing supplies in the wake of the tsunami approached the islanders unharmed, showing that a certain base level of trust had been established. Now, skipping ahead for a moment, the government intervened once more in 2014 when a forest fire broke out on the island. Again, surveyed it, and the islanders were seemingly unharmed. Now, one last bit of history before we move on to the actual topic for our story today, but it leads into it quite well. So in 2006, 2 Indian fishermen were illegally fishing for crabs off North Sentinel Island. They dropped a makeshift anchor for the night and fell asleep in their vessel as it slowly drifted towards North Sentinel Island.
No.
In the early morning, Sentinelese warriors boarded the ship and killed the 2 fishermen with axes. It was then reported that their bodies were strung up like scarecrows on bamboo poles, facing out to sea, presumably as a warning.
Oh, jeez.
3 days after this, though, the Indian Coast Guard did go to the island to try and retrieve the bodies, and the crew found that the bodies had now been buried and abandoned the mission after being attacked with spears and arrows. This was a major story in India, and there was even some talk of trying to prosecute the Sentinelese, but the Indian government ultimately dismissed the calls. That is ridiculous.
Yeah, you can't really do that, can you?
Fast forward to 2018 and we come to today's topic, John Allen Chau. Let's rewind for a second. Chau was born in 1991 in Alabama, USA, the youngest child of an American mother and a Chinese-American father. He grew up with a strong Christian faith and admired explorers such as the famous David Livingstone. It was no surprise when he became involved in missionary work, and he visited Mexico, Kurdistan, and South Africa on missionary trips. In 2015 and 2016, he visited the Andaman Islands and for the first time presumably learned of the Sentinelese. He was associated with the Kansas City missionary group All Nations, and in 2017 expressed interest to them in going to North Sentinel Island. By 2018, he realised his dream and he travelled to the Andaman Islands and began to prepare for his trip to the island that he called Satan's Last Stronghold.
Oh my God, I knew it.
He took precautions. He was vaccinated and isolated himself before his trip, and even prepared an initial contact kit with picture cards and gifts.
Picture cards?
I guess for communication.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant he brought like postcards from various states or something.
So he took precautions. He was vaccinated and isolated himself before his trip, and prepared an initial contact kit with picture cards and gifts. He even took lessons in, and please excuse my pronunciation, I'm going to do my best here, sa.
Oh, cool. I hope that's right.
I don't, well, it isn't.
Oh.
But it's my best attempt at
okay.
doing it. It's my best attempt. I wanted to try and do that, but it sucked. And one thing that Chau did not do, though, was a little thing called seeking permission from the Indian government. Now, one would assume that he knew that he would not be granted that permission and decided to go about some guerrilla missionary conversion. Chau paid 2 fishermen 25,000 rupees, which is enough to buy you all the best gear in Zelda, and is the equivalent of $335 US.
Ooh, bargain.
On the 15th of November, the fishermen took him to the island and parked about 500 metres offshore. They warned Chau not to go any further, but he canoed to the shoreline with his gifts, and in my favourite detail, a waterproof Bible.
Oh, nice. Scuba Bible.
Exactly. He offered the gifts and attempted to communicate with them, but ultimately backed away to his canoe and the safety of the ship. Chau was not put off by this and hunkered down in his base on the Andaman Islands and began to think about what to do. So he wrote some letters home, and in his final letter, he wrote the following.
Brian and Mary and Mom and Dad, you guys might think I'm crazy in all of this, but I think it's worth it to declare Jesus to these people. Please do not be angry at them or at God if I get killed. Rather, please live your lives in obedience to whether he has called you to. And I'll see you again when you pass through the veil. This is not a pointless thing. The eternal lives of this tribe is at hand, and I can't wait to see them around the throne of God, worshipping in their own language, as Revelation 7:9-10 states. I love you all, and I pray none of you love anything in this world more than Jesus Christ. Sole Deo Gloria. Glory to God.
He landed a second time. He decided to make them feel more at ease, so he stripped down to his underwear.
Oh.
Presumably, they just assumed that he was going to try and photograph their wangs at this point.
Or maybe they thought he was going to do the old Amsterdam offensive helicopter move and threaten them back. That's probably a really bad move.
Yeah. Chau tried to sing gospel songs to them and speak to them in Xhosa. Now, anyone who knows languages may realise at this point that Xhosa is actually spoken in Zimbabwe and South Africa, not on these islands. The North Sentinel people just sort of reacted to this in bemusement at first and burst into laughter at his attempt. According to Chau's writing, he held out a Bible to a young boy who then fired an arrow at him and pierced the book.
That's amazing.
Now, perhaps, and I'm just riffing here, he should have taken this as a sign. He didn't, and he visited them again on the 17th of November. It would be his final visit.
Oh.
The last sighting of John Allen Chau was by the fishermen who'd been ferrying him back and forth. They sighted a man being dragged away by the Sentinelese, and the next day observed his body on the shoreline. As the only light-skinned man on the island, his body was quite easy to identify from afar. It was noted that his body was later buried by the Sentinelese people. The fishermen hurried back and gave Chau's possession to his known friend, a Christian preacher in the area, who then notified Chau's family of the death. They, in turn, contacted the American consulate, and by November 19th, all parties had been notified that a US citizen had illegally entered a restricted Indian space and had been killed as a result. Indian officials attempted to retrieve the body, but due to tense standoffs with the Sentinelese people, decided that it was just too risky.
Wow.
Now, a murder investigation was opened, although the family put out a statement saying that they in no way blamed the North Sentinelese islanders for their son's death. The government ultimately closed the murder case for the same reason that the drifting fisherman's case was closed all those years earlier. Chau's father blamed the Christian group All Nations for indoctrinating an extreme version of Christianity in his son.
Were they like a sect or something? Or
They weren't not a sect. They were just missionaries, but they did absolutely nothing to discourage him from going to this island.
Yeah.
They seem to have all taken it quite lightly. So the New York Times reported that members of All Nations dressed up as hostile natives with spears during training camps.
What?
Yeah.
Why did they dress up?
As practice.
Oh, you are kidding me. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah, so this is partly why John Allen Chau was so imbued with feeling that he could do it.
That is
because
insane.
He'd been through the training exercise.
Of a bunch of Americans dressed up as natives from the island with jumping with spears. Like, they know nothing of these people's thoughts or beliefs or how they're going to process seeing a stranger. Like, well, they do know because they shoot arrows into everyone who comes nearby. Why would they suddenly... Oh, because God would protect him, I suppose. Yeah. Oh, that is insane.
Now, the media often reported on this incident as a missionary being murdered by native islanders. And this is true, but as Obi-Wan says, from a certain point of view. Another way to look at it is that this was a man who repeatedly harassed a native group of people illegally, breaching a governmental order not to land on the island. They put up with him for a couple of visits before feeling threatened and decided to defend their island. I'm not going to say that Chau deserved to be killed, but the blame certainly doesn't land on the Sentinelese people.
No, that's just a very unfortunate situation all around.
I mean, he himself even recognised that in his letters.
Yes, he knew what he was going into.
The perspective that Chau was trying to enlighten the islanders is one that's rooted in colonialism and otherness. He was trying to force his beliefs onto them, like many of his forefathers did to native peoples around the world, and ended up dying for his efforts.
Yes, like right at the beginning of the episode when you said, when you asked me about the people, and I said, did someone take the Bible there?
Yeah.
Yep.
Someone's already got to try. So that is the end of that file today.
That was very interesting indeed.
It's something that fascinates me, and I would encourage you to please go to YouTube and please watch some of these interactions. they're like nothing else you'll ever see. It's very, very, very interesting to see. This is the last incident that there's been, and hopefully there are no more.
Just leave them be.
The Indian government's pursuing this policy of hands off except in times of emergency, and clearly these people do not want to be contacted. They want to be left alone. Leave them be.
And if you want to go somewhere isolated, just go to a cabin in the north of Sweden and don't bother anybody.
Please don't land on North Sentinel Island with a waterproof Bible and a toy car and try and convert the people. You are not going to become the cannibal king.
That was a reference to a previous episode, by the way, if you didn't get the Cannibal King.
Yeah.
We're not calling the people of the island Cannibal Kings, but I won't spoil the story, but the episode...
Our previous episode.
...on Monsieur de Rougemont is waiting for you.
So check that out in the archives. And please, if this is your first time listening, please do go and check out some of our other episodes. They're all on different topics, different files, and there'll probably be something that you find interesting.
From true crime to aliens to hoaxes and uncontacted people, it's all there. There's definitely something you'll enjoy in the catalogue. So
we cover them all.
Yep.
So with that being said, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Now, one last bit of history before we actually move on to today's topic was that, but it leads in... God, I can't speak today.
Yeah, me too.
Now, the islands fell under the rule of Independia, West Papua. Known groups exist in Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, Paraguay, Peru, Venezuela.